Here we are. So welcome to YouTube. We are now recording this meeting for the actual news. So we just went over the recently released go over the analytics. So the real-time reporting is now available in the 2.0 API. So previously, if you wanted to do real-time reporting for Power BI, Tableau, like any self-built solutions through the API, you always had to use the 1.4 API, which was fine, but old and cumbersome and like not really what any of the rest is using. So now that's also in the 2.0 API, which is cool and modern and exciting. What we can now also do is in XDM fields with the Web SDK, we now have a way to set context data. So previously, all we could do is just set those like evers and props directly, or use any of the schema fields and then use data prep in your data flow to actually map that to any analytics variable. Now we can set context data as well. There's a _data object within XDM, which is super cool and something that many people would use to especially keep mobile app implementations and web implementations in check, which is super cool. Then, as mentioned before, there's some new methods in the classifications API guide and also some new data sources API guide. So like a lot of new documentation, a lot of updates to the APIs, which is super cool because those are super important to some customers. Then, as I said before, Activity Map is now like without a release date yet. Adobe is really trying to make up their mind and figure out how they're going to do this, because in the current way of implementing Adobe Analytics with app measurement, you don't actually increase server calls if you're using Activity Map, because it's always bundled into the anyways going out server calls. And currently there's no way to do that same thing in Web SDK. That's not a feature that is available. And Adobe is trying to make it available, which is great. And that's the release date is still TBD. So they're just trying to figure out how to do it, which is understandable because it's a big change on the Web SDK side, but still something that is under development. So for the next 3 items, I'm actually going to go into a live demo because those are always fun and never a risk for the flow of the presentation. So let's try. So what we can now do in Workspace is quite a few exciting things. So I just spun up this Workspace project right here. And the first one that I'm really excited for is in those drop-down filters. Previously, we could only select one item at a time. But now, when I click this first item here, I can actually see that the drop-down doesn't close anymore as it did before, and I can now select multiple items at the same time. It's magic. So now, if I actually want to go in here and just select whatever I like, I just click this. Be aware that for larger projects, this can actually be a pretty intensive operation, because you can see with every click this refreshes. So if this would be a much larger project, and if I had to select 10 values at the same time, this could get a little bit expensive on your CPU and your computer. But yeah, it's a super cool feature. What's also a little bit cumbersome is once I click out of this, previously we had workflows all right, I want to go through all my marketing channels one by one, and I can just always click on the drop down and then select whatever channel I want to see, and then it will close and just show me that data. Now, if I change the selection here, of course, now I have both selected. So currently there's no way to turn this into a single select, which would be a nice option to have in the future. And yeah, it's always multi-select. You always need to close it. And what also happens, at least for me on the Windows machine, the first time I click out of this, you can now see the cursor is still blinking here. So once I start typing something, it's actually trying to do that in the dropdown. It's actually trying to find a value there. Then I need to go in here, delete that, click out of it again. Cursor stays in, so I need to again click out of it, and now I'm fully out of the field. So that I would say there's still a little bit of work for Adobe to do on this feature, but it's super cool. It's a great step in the right direction, and yeah, it's something that's going to be really helpful for some companies. But yeah, especially for things like segments or visit number, we need to have a single select option as well. So second big release content for Analysis Workspace is that we can now make URLs clickable. So you can see I'm here like in Workspace with a table that contains URLs in this case. And I can now just click a single item here and then scroll to the right item here that says create hyperlink. And once I do that, I can now say this should be a hyperlink. So this is pretty cool stuff because I can now actually click this and it takes me to the Acutics website in this case. Now it would be pretty cumbersome to just do this for like each and every item individually. So what I can also do is I can just click right here and say create hyperlinks for all dimension items. And this does exactly what it's supposed to. So you can see now all of the items here are clickable. And what I also checked just because I wanted to validate it, once I, for example, select a different filter, you can see it's not just creating hyperlinks for the values in the table that are in there at the point where I enable this option, but it also counts for like all previous or like all future elements that might show up once I change the filters around. So this is super cool basic functionality. What I can also do is, I could have edited it, but I can also just remove it. I can also create a custom URL from this. So what you can see here is you have some specific kind of placeholders that you can use. So something like, for example, value. And I'm just going to copy this in here and say, all right, I want to take any of the items here in my freeform table, but I want to, for example, include a URL parameter to that. Something like, for example, exclude traffic equals true. So, for example, if you want to like have all of your like internal users who view this workspace, whenever they click a link, they should also identify themselves as internal users. I can just create it like this. Don't know why it was showing an error there. It actually was fine. And now, once I click this, I will be taken to the page again, and you can see that it now includes this URL parameter that was nowhere in the table. So this is super cool because like if you want to, for example, for internal traffic, have like a exclusion parameter as I do in this case. If you want to do things like identify your internal users always with a custom CID or something, you can just do that, which is super cool. And you can also, once I go back in here, use a breakdown dimension. So for example, if you have a URL that always ends with like a product SKU and you have that product SKU in a different dimension, you can just select any dimension. I'm just going to select any here. And then you could do something like go in here, select the right value to copy and do something like this. And this would now always, doesn't make the most sense here, but let's see what it actually does here. Yeah, so now it's trying to append the like browser, like the top item from the browser breakdown in this case to this. So it doesn't always make sense to do this with like every breakdown and like every dimension, but it's a cool feature, right? So I really love to see this stuff. And again, if you just want to do it like this, you can just go back to the normal URLs. Now, something to be aware of is this is only for like your individual workspace project, right? So this is now not set for like every user. So you cannot just define this eval that I have here to always be clickable, which would be cool, which is something that I want to have both for Adobe Analytics and Customer Journey Analytics, because chances are I always want to have this clickable. So right now, if I save this, like whenever I go back in here, it will be saved, which is cool. But yeah, once I recreate this workspace project or someone builds it themselves, they will not have this like enabled by default. They can enable it themselves, but you know, whatever barrier users have like to get access to a feature, like they will not use it in the end. So yeah, if there's a way to do this like in a more permanent way in the future, I would be a big fan of that. So then, third item on the list, because there's even one more thing that Adobe has released. So we now have in Workspace, I don't know why this is blinking like it is. Sorry about that. Just because of the dropdown. Well, no, something going on here. Maybe if I remove all links, still blinking, whatever. So another nice feature that we now have is this table of contents feature. So you can now see that in Workspace, I have another icon here in my list of tools, in my list of menus. You can now see that this matches whatever I have set up here in Workspace. So you can see this is now pulling in the name of the panel that I've used here. It's also now pulling in the name of the visualization that I've used here. And whenever I click on something, it will scroll me to wherever that component is used, and I can name my words just by clicking items, which is super cool. And with that, a new visualization, because it would be super to have something like a section in here. So now we have, don't know why they haven't labeled this with the new label here, but it's actually new. Now we have a section header in here. So with that, I can just drag and drop it in, and you will see does nothing really. It's just a separator here, but you can see that this now also shows up in my table of contents. So if I want to like section this a little bit, if I want to make this a little bit easier to consume for people, this is now a very good way to do that without having to do like an empty freeform table that's collapse or whatever. So this is now super cool for that reason alone. And the other reason why this is super cool is for layouting. So if you're familiar with Workspace, you know that once I resize this table, normally whenever I would have the bar chart right below this, it would flip it like to the next row, right? Because there's space, and Workspace is like, well, if there's space there, I'm going to put the visualization in. So now with the section header, we can just separate it like this. And you will see, because the section header is the full width of the screen by default, I mean, you can resize this as well. Like this is now also good for layouting purposes if you just want to have visualizations of different sizes start at the same height, because yeah, that just looks more proper and more real, right? And this is also cool for that use case. So if you want to like visually like structure it a little bit more, that's what you can do with those separators. So if I haven't forgotten anything, that's all we can do in Workspace. And yeah, all of those are now available, which is super cool. And let me know, already seen some reactions in chat. Let me know what you are most excited about, because yeah, for me, it's certainly the clickable links, because like every implementation I've ever seen always has like a URL dimension somewhere, and just being able to click it and it takes you to the page. It's like so much easier for like so many users. So if you like it as well, let me know, because I'm interested what you like. So something else to keep in mind is like some important, like more admin side changes in Adobe Analytics. So if you're unaware, the get page load time plugin for the front end is deprecated now. It still works, but page load times always get updates in terms of like what browsers support, like which method you need to use to actually get your page load time. So Adobe has now quit the support, but that's not bad. There's alternatives to that. They also extend the API, as mentioned in the previous meeting. What they also now have is a 30-month expiration of some saved IDs. So previously, whenever you provide any custom IDs for like your cross-device analytics stitching in Adobe Analytics, that would be like valid for an unlimited time, and now that is a 30-month expiration to that. So if like you haven't set the ID of a user for like 30 months, it's going to expire, which is also good because the cookies on the front end are just like going to expire at that point, and the visitor profile as well. So that's just like something to be expected. Don't expect a big impact of that. Yes, people are sometimes not aware. Regions and countries in the world like to change every now and then. So there has been an update to just the ISO regions of countries and regions like in the world, and Adobe is now like just adapted to that. So for some smaller regions, you might see like slight changes in traffic, but that's not the biggest change in your data that you would expect. And of course, like if you're using the Adobe Analytics APIs or any other Adobe API, and you've been using the WebJSON authentication in the past, Adobe is going to stop supporting that at some point. Currently, they're planning to do that somewhere starting 2025. And there's an alternative to that. It works really nicely. It's way easier because you don't have to manage certificates and all that. You just have a like parameter that you need to maintain. So yeah, if you're using that, you should update your implementation and your integration as well. So that's something to consider as well. And that's all that I have in terms of updates, which is quite a bunch, I would say. People always complain that Adobe Analytics is not getting any updates anymore, and it's only customer journey analytics these days, which I don't think is true. I think we do get some quite exciting upgrades for Adobe Analytics as well. And yeah, so for the people on YouTube, see you next time. Thank you for watching the video. I'm going to stop the recording now.